All right, we are live on the Somebody Like You podcast, and I am super pumped to have a legend of a human being, an emotional growth facilitator, as she said to her in her introduction. And I'm just so pumped to have you, Kat. I'm going to give you the floor here because I will talk till I'm blue in the face. If anybody listening understands, they know that. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, where you're at, and we're going to get this thing started.
Hey guys, I'm Kat, Kat Keefer. My kids call me Keefer for short. What about me? I am a school counselor. I have the privilege of working and serving the students of Chester Upland School District. It is my life. I love it. And I've been a school counselor there. This will be my fourth school year. So I finally got settled down. It took a little bouncing around, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I finally settled down in a place that I can call home with, my students that I call my kids and, staff members that I call my family. So, it's been an absolute roller coaster. My 20s were a roller coaster. That was me figuring everything out, but I finally got there.
And a little background, me and Kat actually worked together at the middle school I went to as a kid, which was like kind of meta. And we were working in the special education department, and that's how we got introduced to each other. I walked in,
Working as
she
paraprofessionals.
that's it. I walked in, Kat gave me this eye, like, who does this? Because I was dressed up, right? Like I was like dressed up to like
Oh my gosh, suit
I
and
was dressed
tie.
up.
You had a tie on.
I did. And like, so remember, it was my first day. I didn't know if I was going to be doing like training in the class or like training up like in the front. So I was like, okay, I need to make it a thing. And instantly they were just like, you go, I think you're overdressed, homie. And I was like, I think you're right. And from there, like it was such a cool connection because it was just kind of like after I took the tie off, it was like we're just kind of in like the mud together. Like we're just figuring this out. And I was super pumped because we talked about a little bit before we jumped on here was like I got to get a sneak peek into like when you were like thinking about going back to school. You're like, I think I'm going to
Mhm.
go back get my master's and be a counselor. And I got to through 2020 through before that, I got to see like glimpses of your path and your journey and to see where you are now, it like is one of those moments that just gives me so much joy seeing somebody say they wanted to do something, have a passion to do it. I've heard about the heartaches going through it and how hard it was. And then like now you're just like it's like a casual like I'm 4 years in, I bounce around and now I'm just
Oh
living it.
yeah. I say that very casually, but like it was a journey for sure to get there. Going back to grad school is a full-time commitment, whether or not you go back part-time or full-time, it's a full-time commitment. So, anyone who's making that dive right now, I try to gas them up as much as possible, because it really does give you that experience to unlock your potential and your passion a little bit more than undergrad does, because undergrad gives you a little taste of everything, but your master's degree, you get to hone in on your craft, and it's a really beautiful experience. And they gave me, I have the pleasure of having interns now. How wild is that? I'm no longer the intern. I have interns now.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really a rewarding experience because I get to see them grow up as well, grow through their passion. And it's just a beautiful thing to see, more school counselors that share my passion out there in the world that just want to do good and emotionally facilitate growth in these students.
Oh my God. That's so I have a question for you. That sparked a question for me. Is since you were just like in that kind of sweet spot right now where you go from being the intern to being the mentor, what is the thing that you I can't say wish you wanted to know as an intern because I think you're just kind of figuring it out as the intern, but what have you learned from your intern time to now your mentor time that you're making a conscious effort to like shine the light back around to be like this is what I wish I would have learned as an intern?
You know, I had such great mentors as an intern that they gave me such a well-rounded experience. I did a practicum and one internship in Philadelphia, and then I actually did an internship at my old high school with my old guidance counselor. So that was a blast from the past. But I just had such wonderful experiences, and they really gave me the reins, which what I try to do with my interns. They didn't coddle me, they didn't baby me. They were like, all right, you're an adult, you're here to learn, and I'm going to throw you in. And I think one of my first times being a real counselor by myself was the counselor at the time went on a trip to Disney with the high school or the senior class. So she's like, you're going to be here for 5 days by yourself. And it was so cool. I was doing schedules, I was seeing kids, I was moving and grooving. But I think that was such a, remarkable experience for me because it showed me that I can do it. I was like, see, you can do this. Because there's always that thought back in my head that was like, can you do this? Like, are you going to be a good counselor? Are you going to know what to say? And, when I first had that experience, I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing. I found it. I can do this. So,
That's
but yeah, I had great interns, and shout out to Lisa Genovese and Meredith Seltzer. They were absolutely wonderful mentors. They really showed me the way, and gave me like figures to look up to as I was moving throughout my degree.
That's awesome, and I think that's the important part is because there has to come like, no matter what you do, there's this moment of, like, whether it be imposter syndrome, am I good enough? When is it gonna feel
Hmm.
real? Like, when am I gonna actually feel like I'm a counselor instead of I'm playing counselor or I'm playing coach or therapist, whatever it may be, whatever your profession is, and I think what they gave you is so important, like, to give an intern 5 days while they're in Disney and be like,
It
"Figure
was
it out, kid."
awesome. Yeah, but like if it wasn't for me, that could have been very triggering. But I was like, all right, I can do this. Like, and it was a great experience for me. And then I was in Philly, which is more akin to, the district that I work in now. And that's where I fell in love with urban education. That's where I fell in love with, the inner city, urban ed, everything that comes with it. That's my wheelhouse and that's my passion. So I was lucky enough to be able to experience that, before I jumped into the workforce.
Because that could be super overwhelming if you're not like familiar with urban ed and all of a sudden like you're used to like the suburbs or you're used to like a certain way of learning, teaching, and communicating, especially. And then you jump in because it's the first job opening that's there. That like like it's so funny to look back and see how your path lined up to like almost clear off this dish for you and then put it on a silver platter and be like, "Hey, you didn't know it at the time and all those heartaches and all that hard time. We were just polishing this dish to serve it to you." Because
Hmm.
of I know you, it's like there's a different way of communicating and being able to be honest, being able to be like you can say that like, yeah, we talked about it before we got on here. It's like if a kid needs to hear, "Hey, get your shit together," or "Stop bullshitting," like being able to communicate honestly with people is, I think, so beneficial for you because that's your communication style.
It is, and my kids are very receptive to it. They prefer me being more straightforward and down to the point, which is more my counseling style anyway. I don't really sugarcoat things because when I was a kid, if someone sugarcoated something, then I'd be like, well, they didn't say that I couldn't do this. So I'm going to run with whatever it is. So, I try to be as straightforward and to the point as possible. And they really respond to that, and my kids are brilliant. They're just like brilliant little beings, and they each have their own set of skills that just like I go in every day and they do something to amaze me. It's just such a rewarding field to be in where you get back everything that you give.
Mm.
And I'll say that one more time, you get back everything that you give. So like I give parts of myself out every single day to these kids, whatever they may need, a shoulder to cry on, a hug, someone to like bounce their ideas off of, someone to like share their pains with. And I give them little pieces of myself, but then they give them the every time they open up to me or they trust me or they break down a barrier, that's filling my cup back up, because that's just, being on that emotional journey with them is just a humbling experience, because I work in middle school. And as everyone knows, kids in middle school, they do not have anything figured out, anything. Like I was weird back in middle school, you know. I was like into Good Charlotte and like guys with their hair spiked up. Like it was just a weirdo. So kids go through like middle school and they're trying to find themselves. Hormones are rushing. So, you know, it's a very interesting time to get involved with kids. And I have sixth through eighth graders. So I get them
Wow.
right after elementary school and I get them right before they go to the high school. So
Phew.
it's an
That's
interesting time.
that's awesome. And I think, like you said, you're in urban ed, so there's just such a variety of like home lives that come. So sometimes
Hmm.
school is the safe place, right? Sometimes a lot of
Absolutely.
kids don't have that reliability and that stability at home. So when they come in, you're that safe place for them to come and talk about emotions, that it's okay to feel things. It's okay.
Hmm.
And then that not only what you say, but how you treat them is what's setting them up for the high school, the next step and stuff like that. You're like you say, you're facilitating emotional growth. You're not just a shoulder to cry on. You're not like what I think a lot
Hmm.
of us think like stereotypically counselors were growing up. It was just like if I have a problem, I go here. They say okay, and like I walk out. Like
And it's
you
funny you
are.
should say that. Like I tell all my kids, I'm like, I want to hear your good days. I want to hear your bad days and I want to hear everything in between. But like I want to hear about the good things. Like you don't have to just come to me when you're having a problem, you know? And I think that that's the stigma we're trying to fight against, right? It's just like, you know, therapists just open up your brain and know all your secrets and then shut you back up and send you on your way. But in reality, you're processing, you know, you're processing with these kids and you're processing with your clients. And um, you're just, when I say process, I mean like you're kind of like delineating those feelings. You are figuring out what actions to take, you know, you're processing it. So just being, it's a humbling experience being able to be with someone on that journey of when while they are processing all these emotions and all these different things that are going on in their life, because it's a very vulnerable experience, you know. And people inherently do not like being vulnerable. It's a really shitty feeling. It's scary, it's icky. Nobody likes being vulnerable. But in order to make genuine human connection, we have to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And with that, it's scary as hell because if you're vulnerable to someone and then they kind of give you their ass to kiss, you know, it's
mhm,
just, it's, you want to shut down and never talk to anyone else ever again. But when you find that person that reciprocates that and says, I hear you, there's nothing more valuable. So that's,
mm,
you know, that's what I try to be for my kids, what I wanted as a kid. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
I want to be that person that I needed as a kid that, you know, would get stand up to bat for me. Um, and it's really an enriching experience being able to go in and see them in sixth grade and then say goodbye to them in eighth grade. Not even goodbye. I mean, like I still keep in touch with most of them, a lot of them, but yeah, it's just, you know, it's a humbling experience is really what I just comes to mind.
Oh my gosh. And I think you touched on a couple really big things. And it was when you open up and you're vulnerable, not even just the first time, but life's about patterns, right? If every time you open up and you're not surrounded by people who you're feeling allowed to be vulnerable around, you're never going to be vulnerable. If you can never express what vulnerability feels like, and like you said, if someone does turn around and give me their ass to kiss at that age and I'm being vulnerable, I need to kind of understand that feeling of
Mhm.
like, is it because especially at that age, even when you get older, if you haven't been able to process it and had someone there, you think it's you no matter what.
Yeah.
It's what I said, the way I feel, the lunch I ate today,
But that's
whatever it
the
might be.
ego. That's the
Mhm.
ego. And
Yep.
when your ego feels like it's been hurt or damaged, you just go back into your shell. When in actuality, you know, our ego is our pride. And we have to kind of humble ourselves and be like, you know, this, whatever this experience is, it can be nothing else but a learning experience, you know? So you kind of have to like get your ego in check and then proceed forward because the ego is going to tell you every time, don't, don't make yourself vulnerable. This is gonna suck. Someone's gonna break your heart. Somebody's gonna do this. They're not gonna receive it well. But then, you know, I always tell friends, my kids, anything, um, when somebody has wronged you, you have the ability to let them know how you felt and get vulnerable with them. And it may not be well received. They might just, shut the door right in your face, but you have the power to share how you're feeling. And that's an incredible experience because even if it's not well received, you still deserve to be able to share what's going on within you. You know what I mean?
That's
Have you have you read the book The Four Agreements by
yeah, I have. Don Miguel or Miguel
Miguel Ruiz? Yeah,
Ruiz. Yeah,
that book actually like really changed my experience of like my own consciousness. Like not taking things personally is a real big one, you
oh my
know.
gosh. I have them.
Because
I have my journal right here, right? And on my front page of my journal, I have it's called My Journey, and I have the four. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but on the top here, I have literally be impeccable with your word, do not judge, do
yes,
not assume, and do your best.
and that book is so digestible. You know what I
Yep,
mean? Like the information that they give you, it just makes sense and you don't really have to think too hard about it and then just kind of like, oh, that does make sense. But I'm getting off on a tangent, but that book kind of, supports the notion that you should, share what's going on, be impeccable with your word,
that's
share
huge.
what you're feeling because even if it's not well received, you still put that out into the universe about that's how you're
Mm.
feeling and you're getting used to sharing your emotions no matter how comfortable uncomfortable it may be.
You're learning, and you talked about the ego, and this took me a really long time because I felt like I was in a bar fight with my ego for
Yeah.
forever. And so then I don't know, like if you dive into spiritual work, like the spiritual community, religious community, whatever it might be, whatever your belief systems are, they talk about like this ego death, right? You got to rid your ego, this and that. And I kind of challenge in saying, like, what if you like create a really positive relationship with your ego. Like you understand what the ego is trying to do and you don't judge it for it. Like the ego is trying to protect you. It's trying to do all of these. If you ever read A Course in Miracles, they explain it pretty well. And it's kind of like your ego is designed to want to protect you. But
Hmm.
what it's doing is what society has taught us to do these days is let ego run the show, and it's not equipped to run the show. It's equipped to pop in from time to time and be like, "Hey, are you sure that's what we want to do?" And then
It's
like
almost part
you
of that fight or flight.
yep, it's exactly it. And so like when you're talking about like when you are able to build a relationship with your ego and understand where it's coming from, you're not only building a relationship with your ego, you're building a relationship with yourself, and that translates to when other people are like a reflection of you. Because a lot of times when people are mean to you, a lot of times when people are reacting in certain ways, that's really a version of you reacting back to you. It's those
Hmm.
deep, dark secrets that you felt like icky about. It's those intrusive thoughts, those thoughts that creep
Gotta
in and
love
tell
those
you,
intrusive thoughts.
right? And when you work on that relationship, you understand there's this separation from you and it. It's like, oh, I can step back and understand you're trying to protect me, but those aren't how I feel. It's like the ego's like a roommate. You can either have a good day with the roommate or a bad day with the roommate.
Yeah,
Sometimes they wash the dishes, sometimes they don't wash the dishes. Like,
exactly.
yep.
Exactly. And, I think as I got older in my life, I tried to humble myself a little bit more so that ego isn't as strong. I'm constantly a lifelong learner. I'm not even, I'm not an expert on my craft. I'm just living it and I can tell my own experience. But yeah. But how about you? Are you going back to school? What are you doing?
I'm glad you asked. I am actually back becoming a certified holistic integrative health coach.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
I am studying and working with actually the Nickerson Institute of Integrative Health Training. There'll be more coming up on that. I'm currently working on some content with them because we kind of aligned on goals, missions, and they saw some stuff that I do here, and we are just in super alignment. I actually had a really good Zoom call with Wendy. Dr. Wendy Nickerson is the person who runs the course and is the
Mhm.
institute, and she has Jeanette, who is in her it's like her, I say not office administrator, but she does like all the marketing, does all the support stuff with her. And you talk about like certain things, like this is the direction we want to go. And then you start talking about life and coaching and communications and
Yeah.
connection. And all of a sudden you start seeing how much more is into it than like we were talking about just the, hey, we're having a bad day, come see me. Like you're providing so much more, like you're providing a connection, and that's mind, body, spirit, soul, whatever verbiage people like to use in their belief systems.
And a reinforcement. You're a reinforcer because on those good days, you're still reinforcing positive, good behaviors that are eliciting these beautiful days, you know?
Hmm.
So that's why it's so
It's
important to be there during the good days and the bad because you got to experience the sunshine and you got to experience the rain to really get a good picture of what's going on.
Oh my gosh. And one of the big things I always talk like, cause when you said that, when you're like, I want them to come to me on their good days too, like that like made my inside smile, because that's something I talk to people about all the time. I was like, your perspective is your superpower. The things you're giving your attention to are the things that are going to keep coming back to you. So if you're just focusing and we're just talking about all of the bad things or the things that feel inherently bad, that's all you're going to continue to experience. So why don't we start learning how to change our focus to why do these things that feel bad, how can we turn them into lessons or positives, right? Not
Mhm.
everything of it, because especially people who go through like traumatic experiences growing up, it's really hard to tell them that was good for you, right? That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, what can we learn from that? How can we turn that into a positive? And one thing I always say, if you're looking for a positive in the trauma you've experienced, uh, my journey has always been, how can I turn the things I've went through into helping somebody else who's going through something similar?
Similar perspective. I'm the same way every time I go through something that's unfortunate or really, upsetting. I'm like, this is preparing me for something because there's nothing more valuable than when a kid comes in and you might not know the experience that they went through, but you might know the emotion and you can say, like, I understand how you're feeling.
Mm,
And in that, moment of empathy, you kind of that kid understands that you understand, and then they don't feel so alone. So,
th- th-
it's
that's
sometimes
so important.
sometimes these situations that we go through are just, training us for something bigger in our lives, and it sucks to look at it that way. Um, but we're constantly being molded and shaped. We're not just like, a action figure, where you're stiff and rigid. Like we are constantly being molded and shaped, and that's the way we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to stay stagnant. We're supposed to grow and we're supposed to mature into these, responsible adult human beings, whatever that may look like.
I always
yeah.
I always say, and I didn't say this, Bruce Lee did. It was like, "Be like water, my friend," right? And I think I thought that was a really cool saying, and I never understood it until these past couple years. I was like, everything is always changing. So what you may believe in and what you feel is right now, that's okay. But what I've learned is leave an openness for yourself to change your mind down the road, because when
Hmm.
you're able to change and be flexible and like we say mold or be water, what that's doing is allowing you to continue down the stream instead of try to swim up the stream against the current. Like it's all going one direction, like go with it. And the point of that was because I had this thought to tell people all the time, like there is no like final destination. The whole
Hmm.
destination is like you're at the destination now, you're on the journey. It's all a journey wherever you're
Hmm.
going. So when you go with the stream and you be like water, you go around the rocks, you go into the valleys, wherever it may take you, that's the journey. And you're going to learn different things at different parts of that river.
Yeah, and I think, talking about experiencing and traumas and things like that, unfortunately, I work in an area where, a lot of my students are exposed to just, substance abuse, gun violence, things, low socioeconomic related issues. Um, And there's a study out there by Dr. Nadine Burke. She did a TED talk on it. I'll send it to you later. You might want to read it or watch it. But she talks about these ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. So you tally up these ACEs, and I'm not going to do it justice talking about it, but you there's different criteria for ACEs, and every one that you have, you get like a tally mark. And when you have a certain amount of ACEs, it can predispose you to things like ADHD, heart disease, things like that that physically manifest inside of you. So um, I take my job very seriously because I have such a high number of students coming in with these ACEs that, we have to work against that because it does cause, like lower test scores and things like that. Because why would you worry about a test in front of you when you didn't get enough to eat last night? You know what I mean? Your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's what it comes down to. I mean, what are food and
Survival.
water? Survival. What are food and water right there at the top of the pyramid or the bottom of the pyramid? I'm forgetting my Maslow pyramid, but um, yeah, and I think we do such a disservice in this country to represent some of these students because what we do in America is we put all the kids on an even playing field. And I know that they have IEPs and 504s and things like that, but we're not giving we're not affording the same resources or resources that are adequate for the environment to some of these areas. Like if you can look at you can compare, an urban area with a high gun violence to a suburban neighborhood that doesn't experience any gun violence. And why are you giving them the same resources if one is experiencing something at a higher rate than the other one? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of inequities that we're kind of fighting against, and that's what makes my job so interesting because I have to work with limited resources and work around these challenges and work
Mm.
with these challenges and kind of derive meaning from these challenges. Um, but my kids are the ones that do the hard work, they're the ones that sit with me and, they see this tall lady just sitting there staring at them, and they're the ones that open up to me and really show me what they're about. And that takes an incredible amount of vulnerability to do, and these are children, it's remarkable.
You have to and like what you're doing and you're saying is you're reinforcing that strength and that vulnerability so it can be repeated in the future to be their true selves instead of being this masked version of themselves that has only been taught to survive. And
Yeah.
that's all they're operating on. And to your school point, it just really comes down to laziness. It really comes down to laziness and not adapting to certain areas that are exposed to different things. Like to fit everybody and every environment and every culture and socioeconomic background under one umbrella
It's
is
insane. It's
it's so
insane.
unfair.
And even different, different areas, I mean, I work in Chester. It's an urban area, it's a city. And then you can go 5 minutes down the road to Aston, which is a cute little community, suburban community. And the school districts, are kind of like night and day. And, it's just difficult. It's really hard to see, you know, some kids getting afforded certain resources that others are not.
Yeah, and when I say laziness, I mean from the top, not like
Oh,
the school
yeah.
districts itself. It just means I think the whole school model itself needs to be updated because I can
It
even
would take a
speak
major overhaul.
and but that's the thing is it's needed, right? Because
Mhm.
I think all of the things like the 8-hour day and all that, it was all based off Henry Ford's factory workers. Like, it's
Yeah.
not life anymore. It's things are so different. Like, emotional health, emotional well-being needs to be so much more at the forefront of things. Like, I was lucky to go to North Penn High School where I had a psychology class my senior year. Like, most
Yes.
schools do not have a psychology class. You get like English, social studies, science, gym, math, and like you get the basics, then you just kind of work your like in North
I took
Penn.
AP psychology and they didn't even make me pay for my AP exam. They paid for it.
And, like, talk about, like, you're not afforded that in different places. Like, you know, if you go to Chester, if you go somewhere, like, you might not get that experience, you might not get that exposure. We might not be where we are right now because I know that's like I loved that psychology class. Like, I was like,
Oh, yeah,
I
that's where I found my passion. It was
yep.
sociology and psychology that I took, and I was like, "Wow, people really are my wheelhouse." Like, I don't
Mhm.
wanna sit in a cubicle all day and just, like, type because I would get myself into too much trouble, there's too much room for error. I really value that human connection. I look forward to seeing my students. There's nothing better in the morning than, I mean, granted, some mornings it gets a lot, but when you get out of your car and you just see your students running towards you, like at full speed, yelling your name, like that's the best wake up call that you can get. And then when can I schedule an appointment? Can I come in for an appointment? And I'm just like overwhelmed because again, I am I'm the only counselor for one middle school,
Wow, you're the only one.
only one.
Wow.
Um, we do have a social worker, but she has her own set of kids that she sees. And she's absolutely wonderful. We work as a great team. And that's another thing. Like working as a team when you're in this field, it's invaluable because you constantly should be bouncing ideas off of other people, making sure that you're staying concurrent.
Oh my gosh. I use the analogy all the time, because I think whether it be any profession, you see something that's different than you, and some people feel like it's a challenge to your experts, the ego. It's a challenge to your ego.
Mhm.
Um, and so like when people ask, like, well, what's the difference between coaching, counseling, therapy, hypnotherapy, all of these things? And I say, imagine it's like a tree, right? And the tree is just healing. It's just a healing tree. And there's so many different branches on there. We're all a
Yeah,
part
I
of the
like
same
that.
right? We're all
I
part of
like
the same
that.
tree, but some branches can't support you in right now and some can. So I always say, especially like in the coaching world, is like if there's a stigma to you of therapy, and every time you hear therapy, think of therapy, talk to a therapist, you can't open up. Well,
Mhm.
therapy, you're not getting it from therapy, but maybe like how like I think of myself as a coach is like it's much more relatable. It's much more laid back. It's much more I feel real. There's not so much of a barrier between me and you where you
Mhm.
can feel like it's you're talking to someone you know. You can trust this person. Like and then from there like I say as the coach, well now when we start diving into trauma and more deep things like that's not my wheel. We can discuss the trauma, but I'm not going to be able to provide you the tools that therapy or counseling is going to be able to. But since we're
Mhm.
both on since this healing tree exists, now you have access to my network. I have people that I am like, whether it be a Kat Keefer who's a counselor, whether it be a person I know as a therapist, like now you have access because you're on the tree. But the first
Yes.
thing is you have to get to the tree to start your healing process, and all of us are here for you.
And sometimes people really struggle getting to that tree because there is a stigma still attached to mental health because historically the field of medicine was not very kind to people of certain ethnicities. So there's a large distrust in the for the medical community. And that's something that we should be actively combating because these atrocities were committed. People are like, I'm not gonna mess with this anymore. I saw what happened way back. So you need to be cognizant of that as we need to be cognizant of that as counselors, therapists, coaches, because, you know, I don't know, it's just it's important to know. It's important to make sure you're making yourself available.
And I think that's where like it's so important because when you realize your role is a healer, not so much like a counselor, a coach, not so much in your label, like that was really the place the avenue you decided, felt called to, that you could best creatively express your way of helping people.
Mhm.
And I think that's where it's so important to understand like you are breaking down barriers and brick walls for people that have this understanding of what healing is and how it's either weak or it's corny or it's for whatever reason it makes you whatever. All of a sudden you start realizing like I'm the person that's walking them up to this door and opening it, and their last experience is me, to understand that this is an option for them.
Yeah, and it's important for us to realize that it's them doing the hard work. It's your client, it's your student, it's whoever. It's them doing the hard work. You're just kind of there to like, brush the path off for them
Hmm,
to show them where the bricks are. You know what I mean?
I love that.
Yeah.
I say this, in the beginning of every call I ever have with a new client, I always say this. I say, "I'm just gonna give you the secret sauce right now. You're doing the work." Like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna let you know the powers, like, I'm not gonna give you a secret recipe to fix anxiety or panic or depression. What we're going to do is you're going to build a blueprint for yourself, and I'm gonna help walk you there. And I'm gonna help
Mhm.
I always call myself like a tour guide. I say,
Yeah.
I'm on this
For
with you."
real though.
Yep. Yep, and, like, because I tell like, I don't like my I'm creative in the way I discuss it, but my I like to tell them what's happening, what you can expect. I'm saying, "What we're doing is if you don't build this plan and I build it for you, it's not working. The
Mhm.
power has to come from you because I'm not you. What my plan looks like, I had to do myself. So when you're building your plan, you have my support. I'm always here. You can, and then this is just more job specific to me. DM me, text me, whatever, set up a call. We'll do that. But I'm your support system. I'm creating the space for you to learn how to navigate this vulnerability, this path, and this healing. Where for if you were to do this by yourself, you might not be held accountable. You might not have me here to
Yeah.
call your bullshit, like those
Yeah,
kind of things.
And that's what it's about. And it's not about just like, holding their hand all the time. Sometimes you got to call them on their bullshit and be like, you know what? Yeah, and I told you, one of my kids was like, Miss Kiefer, I don't like sugarcoating. And I was like, well, then get your shit together. And she was like, thank you. I needed that. And I was like, you know what? I'm here for you anytime. But um, I think people really value directness because it creates more anxiety when you don't understand something fully, you know what I mean? Like, if you leave
Mhm,
room for error, yeah, or room for, wiggle room of what you were trying to say, then people might take that differently, they may not, get the message, so I think being direct, but also, gentle. Direct and gentle, I think is the best route that I take, because
mhm.
I work with middle school kids. They don't want to do their homework. They don't want to do their work. They just want to make TikToks in the hallway. But sometimes you got to get firm with them and be like, you know what? Like,
Get your shit
but
together.
get your shit together. But you know what? Kids got to see a future. Everyone has to see a future for themselves. And the state of Pennsylvania, there's Act 339, and that mandates that we do career education lessons for our students. It's a pain in the ass, but we do it, and you have to have artifacts for each student basically showing that we taught them this, and that's all fine and dandy, but where the real work happens is my one-on-ones with my kids, because I always ask them, hey, what do you want to do? What do you And you know what, asking a kid what they want to do is so beautiful, because they're just if their answers are so pure, they don't really think about limitations or boundaries or how hard it's going to be to get there. My kids are like, I want to be a doctor. One of my kids like, I want to be a delivery nurse. And I'm like, then let's do that. And here are the steps that we're going to take to make sure that you get there. And I think that it's so beautiful just hearing, their dreams and seeing, because they need to see a future outside of the city walls,
Mhm,
walls, quote. They need to see a future outside of that because it's such a small city, and um they need to they need to get out and, experience life outside those city walls and figure out what they want to do. And just seeing them light up when they talk about what they want to do and their dreams and their passions, and you really seeing them get going, it's beautiful. But then you kind of got to relate it back to them like, okay, well, do you think somebody would you want your doctor doing TikToks in the hallway instead of being in class? You know what I mean? You kind of got to chop it up for them, break it down. But it's beautiful seeing, like, just hearing about people's dreams and what they want to do. And even if they don't know what they want to do, going on that journey with them, like, well, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure out where your place is.
because what you're doing in that process is you're showing them what their strengths are. One, it could
Mhm.
be you have the foresight to kind of have a direction you see yourself going, and then when you're trying to break it down and piecemeal it for them, you're having them focus on the good things about themselves, which maybe no one has done. Maybe no one told, like, "You're an
Yeah.
excellent listener. Wow, when you communicate with me, I really understand what you're saying. Oh my gosh, when
That's
I see you,"
huge.
like,
Communication's huge. That's like the overarching theme of my year last year was communication.
that's
Communication.
and so think about that, like, because I think back to my personal life, and I'm sure you can relate, is what role models or mentors or just figures in your life, when they tell you good things about yourself, like, I can go back to, like, 7th grade and someone saying, "Wow, your eyes look really good in that shirt." I will wear a green shirt anywhere I go now because I know my eyes, like, it's the little
Yeah.
things that people will say to you that will stick with you for the rest of your life.
And
So when
sometimes
you're
complete strangers.
Yep.
Like, that's my thing when a complete stranger comes up to you and they're just like, "That was really funny," or "I really like your shirt," or "You look really great." It's just, it just makes you it restores your faith in humanity, doesn't it?
It it's like a reinforcer of, like, "Wait a second, I am good, I am worthy, I have these positive things," instead of being, because, like we said, we never know where people come from. So maybe at home, they're ignored, maybe they're not given support, there could be abuse in the house, like, all of these things, but when you have a positive role model or a positive person or figure in your life telling you the good things that you possess, well, you're gonna now be more prone to look and see that in different professions. Like, when you
Mhm.
say a doctor, you're like, "Wow, you're a really good communicator." You know what a really good doctor is? A really good, yeah, they're smart, they go to school, they do all this, but the magic's when they're sitting in a room with a patient and making them feel heard, understood, and comfortable. You really are good at that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I can identify with that, I feel that statement so much. Um, my dad's been sick for a while, he's had cancer for since I was in, like, 4th grade, and I know, like, my mom goes with him, she comes home and she is in, a better place when she feels like that doctor took the time to communicate with her and to make sure she understood everything and that they have a game plan, and I think that can be said for anyone, you know?
Absolutely, and those moments of, like, your life, like you said, since you were, like, 4 years old or in 4th grade,
4th
like,
grade, yeah.
4th grade, like, you have an understanding what that feels like, right? Having a parent
Mhm.
like that worry, right? And then you see what that can do to a family and, like, how you can become a team through all of that. Like, you
Yes.
like, those things, like, I'm sure throughout your life, you sit there and you ask why, like, "Why does my dad have to go through this? Why is this happening?" But, like, now you're in a situation where you have an understanding and an empathy to what people are going through that
And
that gives you.
And you know what? Something beautiful happened at work the one day. So sometimes you sit and you wonder, why am I going through this? Why is my dad sick? Why? And I had a parent give me a phone call and she said she was just got diagnosed with cancer and she was sick and she was in the hospital. I was like, "What were you diagnosed with?" She said multiple myeloma, which is the same exact rare form of cancer that my father has. And I said, "No way." I was like, "My father has that and he's been living with it for over 20 years."
Wow.
And, and she just it was like a weight was lifted off of her because she was speaking with someone who understood what her son and her were going through because her son was one of my students. And it was just such a it was like everything came full circle. It was like, okay, this is why. This is why I went through all of this so that I could be there for one of my students and let him know that everything's going to be okay. Because I went up to him, I was like, "Do you know that your dad and my dad and your mom have the same cancer?" And he was like, "Miss Keefer, no way." And it was just like he wasn't alone anymore. You know what I mean? And
And
it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience because both of them, both um, my kid's mom and my kid, they both felt, understood and heard, and that it was going to be okay.
that's a power you can't find unless you go through that. And right, and talk about,
Yeah,
I'm sure you explained that with your dad, and talk about him now having that even more sense of a pride of like, wow, my experience that I've gone through is now providing light, hope, and understanding to a completely
exactly.
new family.
Exactly. And, you know, and just I will never forget the look on my kid's face when I told him about my dad. It was just like he was just like he lit up almost because he wasn't alone anymore. He had someone to go through with him on this journey. And I instead of, you know, saying why me all the time, you got to kind of take a step back and see what can this situation do to serve me?
Mm.
Because we can learn from everything, whether you choose to or not, but everything's a learning experience, and you take from it what you wish.
I say that I think the same thing, and I always say, like, especially when I have my anxiety and my panic disorder, like, acts up, I always say, "What am I learning from this? What is the lesson here? Blah, blah, blah." And sometimes there's not all like, that's tough because sometimes you're just going through something, but I think the powers and the mindset of it, of when you sit there and you say, "What is the positive lesson I'm taking from this?" You stop whatever is happening in its tracks, and it goes to the fork in the road and goes down the different path, because now you're looking for positivity. And just like if you were continuing looking for the woe is me, the victim, the this and that, like
Yeah,
I'm you're gonna find what you're looking for. So when you
absolutely.
look for the lesson, that's like, and that's always I say, like, I know this is gonna sound really simple. That's my like one of my like lines on my calls. I know this might sound like stupidly simple, but you're gonna look what you're finding for, or you're gonna find what you're looking
Yeah,
for.
of course, every
Yep.
single time.
And
Um,
that's huge. And I think like what you're going through and what your family is going through, like I got chills as I was even saying it to you before. It was just kind of like the power of that. Cause now your family has this experience and you're like the middleman, right? You're the
mhm,
connection between this, what can be disastrous, ugly, and such a tormenting process, but you're this beautiful beam of light that connects love, understanding, and connection between strangers going through
yeah.
a very similar experience.
Yeah, and you know what? It was beautiful because I felt as though his mom felt better, he felt better, everyone felt better, and it gave me purpose, you know, it gave my story purpose.
Mhm.
Even though it sounds kind of selfish, it gave me purpose to, you know, make them feel less alone because it
And
is
what people
scary, you know?
Oh my gosh. And what people need during that time is that sliver of light, that sliver of hope. And because oftentimes the difference between being happy and sick, I'm not talking about it in, as far as cancer goes, but recovery mindset is so powerful.
Oh
Because
yeah,
if you have that
absolutely.
belief, you have that hope, you have that support, you have all of this, all of a sudden your body starts reacting differently because it's not filled with stress, anxiety as much as it could be. And all of a sudden, it starts to do wild things and start to heal. You start to get a little bit more signs from different directions. And all of a sudden, you start seeing things differently. And all of a sudden, this whole new, like, I don't want to call it a completely green pasture, but a pasture opens up that you would have never seen because you would have been so focused on that diagnosis, which is incredibly scary.
But we don't even need that green pasture. The pasture can have divots, the pasture can have bald spots. It's what you make of it, you know what I mean? Nobody wants a perfect pasture, that's boring. That's so boring.
Yeah.
You know, you need a pasture with divots that's been, like, well worn and that has life to it, you know?
I might age myself here, but I don't know if you grew up playing like kick the can or like
Oh, yeah,
Manhunt.
absolutely.
When was the most fun you had playing kick the can? When it was, like, in the middle of a street or a cul-de-sac, and it
Oh,
wasn't
yeah.
over at, like, the perfectly manicured playground. It was, like, this you and your
Yeah.
friends, it's I as soon as you said that, that's the first thing I thought of, was like, no, like, it doesn't have to be beautiful to be, it doesn't have to be, like, beautifully, like, manicured to be, like, this moment of beauty. You can find that anywhere. Like, I've had a lot of really great moments in the middle of a street that was probably filled with potholes, like, that's crazy. I like, you said it, and I just had this, like, vision of it. I was like, That's a really profound statement.
Things that are perfect are just, they're imperfect. You know what I mean? Like you gotta know pain to know joy. You gotta know the rain to know the sun. And one of my kids, every time she was having a bad day, I'm like, what do I always say? And she's like, "Ugh, it can't rain forever." And I'm like, it can't and it won't. The sun is going to come out, whether it's a few days, few weeks, or tomorrow. Its sun is going to come out. And but I think it's really Brene Brown put it perfectly. She said you can't selectively numb your emotions. Um, and it was so profound because when you numb yourself, you're numbing yourself to everything. You can't selectively numb what you want to be numb to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I
When you
do.
get Novocaine, you don't just numb a little area, it's your whole damn mouth that starts drooping. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're selectively numbing ourselves, like if you go through a breakup or if you go through someone passing away and you try to numb yourself to that, then you don't know joy either because you are so working so hard at trying not to feel pain that you're robbing yourself of the joy. And how do you know how joyful something is if you don't know how painful something is? You know what I mean? That joy is not going to feel as good if you did not know that pain. You know what I mean?
I do. It's the law of duality. Without one, the other can't exist. If it
Exactly.
without the nighttime, the daytime wouldn't exist. The sun, without us, the sun wouldn't exist because there wouldn't be anything to observe light. So it's like one of those things where like you're talking and it just resonates with, how I think and how I process things is that's the lesson. That's like that positive perspective is like when how I know it's not going to rain forever is because I've seen the sun before.
And you got it. Perfect. I love the way you just said that.
And that's because there's this in my extensive research about anxiety, that's how it works. Like,
Hmm.
not to get too scientific, but the amygdala triggers, it listens to the body, all of this, and it cortisol levels rise, blah blah blah, which is anxiety is an unwanted adrenaline rush.
Yes.
And the way I always think about all of this is your body can only produce so much adrenaline at once. So my thought has always been now, once I've learned that, is it has to end. The sun has to come out
It
because this
will.
this darkness only has so much juice.
But
It's gonna
sometimes you
run
got to
out.
fight like hell for it, you know? If you're complacent and you just sit there in your own misery, then you're not going to find that sunshine. You have to actively go out, put your umbrella, put your rain boots on and go through that damn rain until you find the sun. Because it's
It's
not
so
a
important.
passive experience. You need to be engaged.
And because I think of it that way, like I found my purpose in helping others. Like, so I was like, okay, I'm going through this so I can help others go through this. So with that simple and not simple, I think of it as simple now, but of that mindset, I wouldn't have read that book. I wouldn't have done all that extensive studying. I wouldn't
Mhm.
have learned that if it wasn't for how can I use this as a tool? How can I use this as my umbrella opposed to being anxiety? I am not anxiety. Anxiety is a tool I have that I get to share and help with others because I understand it.
But you know what? I think there's something to be said for anxiety gives you a little bit of edge sometimes because I feel like your anxiety, depending on how it manifests, can more fine tune you to other people's emotions. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like if you're
highly
feeling,
sensitive
if
people for
you,
sure.
they're just like very sensitive and you are sensitive to other people's beings, what other people are need, and sometimes what you need. You know what I mean?
Energy, man. I'm big on like reading, feeling, tuning into energy and stuff like that, and that's something I learned from childhood trauma, childhood bullying through elementary school. Like, I learned and it was put in so maybe this is something that a therapist said this to me when we had because you a childhood trauma you don't really remember because I blocked it out. It was just I
Yeah.
repressed them. And we talked about all that stuff and I was like, yeah, no, but this tool I do have is like I can walk into a room and I know instantly things to say, how to be liked, when to be funny, all of these things.
Hmm.
And it was almost like one of those like you learned how to survive, you learned how to read
Yeah.
energy and how to step into a room. So what was once survival has now turned into what I feel is my greatest tool of understanding, feeling, reading, and tapping into energy, because I can use that to help people now. I can use that. And so, like, what you're talking about, like that, without that anxiety, with like, I'm a highly sensitive person. And when my anxiety gets going, I'm tuning into something and I'm like, oh
Mhm.
my gosh, okay, like I'm surviving right now. My
It
body
makes
is
you a
trying
little
to.
bit more intuitive.
It is. And, that's, sometimes that's a hard path to jump in with people, but that's, my path. So, like, that's why I think what
Yes.
you're really good at, and what I think, I strive to continue to work on and be good at, is understanding and tuning into that energy of people I'm working with and relate.
Mhm.
Like, so, like I said, I know what to say, how to say it, this and that. Well, instead of doing that to benefit me, I'm now doing that to find the best way to communicate with somebody. Because now
Yeah.
I know how you can understand best. And it's not going to be talking about spirituality and energies and this and that. I need to relate it to how you hear. And I think that's where I think your greatest gift of, like you said, like all of those things got you to this school district in which you get to be your authentic self and your
Oh,
authentic
yeah.
helping self. It
I
looks
mean,
like
I
we may
was
have just lost Cat. Oh, you
oh.
just we just lost you for a second. I was like, and it looks like we just lost Miss Cat. So
I'm back. Um, what was I gonna say? It was definitely a journey, but I do feel like I found my home, I found my family, and it's just a beautiful feeling, and it's very humbling to be able to serve the students that I do serve. It's because
and
that's what you're doing, it's a service. You're providing a service to the students of the Chester Upland School District, and I think
and to
that
yourself.
and to me, because like I said earlier, these kids fill my cup back up too. Like they're
Yep.
brilliant. They show flickers of brilliance every single day. And it just fills my cup back up to see them emotionally and physically navigating their way through this world. But that could
And
be
I used
said for any child, any child. It's just it's an honor to be able to work with them and go through it's an honor to go through anyone's journey with them.
It is. And speaking on that journey, I remember working with and like intellectually just disabled. I don't ever know like the right proper way to say it. Like, but in the ID world, right? Growing up, I used to always, from like a young age, think, I'm like, how cool is it? I get to see life through a different perspective. And
Mhm.
what these kids offer and what my clients offer to me is I get to see life through a different perspective of an appreciation for what they're going through. So as much as I know I am helping someone, they are helping me so much by sharing their story, being vulnerable. And like I said, that fills my cup, is like, you're letting me into your life, which you probably don't let many people, if any people, into that version of you. So
Yeah.
I always say at the end of my calls, or especially when I feel like we had a really good chat and it's not about me, they say thank you to me, and I'll always say, I want you to also know I thank you. You are playing such a crucial role in me serving my purpose and me being here, and you are helping me more than you will ever possibly know. Because I think letting those kids, or letting my clients know, like, what you're doing is helping me. Like, your service is also to me, as I'm also like doing my best to give service to you. Like, and that gives them a sense of purpose. That gives them a sense of like, hey, we're in this together. This isn't just a one-sided, like, I'm
Bingo.
not
I think
this guru.
finding some sort of parallel between yourself and somebody else is, it's so remarkable because, it allows you to feel akin to somebody else. You feel a sense of like of belonging with somebody else. Everybody wants to feel like they're understood. And I think that the key to understanding someone is knowing that even if you don't understand, you can still provide a pillar of support. You know what I mean?
And you're there to support each other. And I think,
Absolutely.
because I think once, I mean, as we're wrapping up here, I always like to keep at an hour because I always want to be able to bring you back if you'd like to come back. But as we're ending it up here, because I think what's really important there is when you give somebody that sense of purpose, like they're not going through this for nothing.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, that turns that perspective of like, I'm going through this to help people. And like what they're going through is currently helping my coach or my counselor. Like, you going through this is not for nothing. You going through this is helping me help you.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
So Kat, I am so happy that you joined. I told you it was just gonna be like us, like friends, like chopping it up. And I always like to leave the last couple minutes here to if you have any messages, if you have any things going on, any things you're supporting or want to bring, visibility to, um, take your take your flowers and take your curtain call and let people know.
No, I mean, I'll be doing some fundraisers for Toby Farms Intermediate School coming up, getting some gift cards for the kids and things like that. So that'll be coming up soon. If you'd like to donate, that would be awesome. But other than that, just, make sure to live your authentic life and be your authentic self because the world doesn't need any more copycats. We need more authentic beings. So that's my word to go.
I love it. And stay on the podcast. We're gonna once I end this, we're just gonna jump over and wrap it up a little bit, just me and you. But I want to thank everybody who has been tuning in, who hopefully learned as much as I did. Because anytime I talk to Kat, especially in this world of healing and being there for others and being your authentic self, you're somebody who I always am fortunate enough, and I want to thank you on the podcast for letting me be my authentic self around people because there's not many
Absolutely.
people in that world, you know?
You're a blessing, Ben, and you showing your authentic self is helping people. So keep it up.
I appreciate you. Well, everybody, thank you so much. We're going to close this out, and I will catch you on the next episode, or I will catch you when I catch you. Talk to y'all later. Peace.